third day and the final day of our online school on migration statistics. Before we begin, I'd like to check with our technical team and whether everything is okay. Kenza, is everything okay?
Yes, Brian.
Interpretation
Yes.
and everything?
Exactly. Everything is ready. We could perhaps wait for 4 minutes and for 3 minutes now and start. We could start at 10 past. So I said that everything is in order. We could just give it 3 minutes and start, if that is okay. Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kenza.
Hello, Brian?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, sorry. How are you?
I'm good, Yakuba. How are you?
Yeah, fine, yeah. No, since the presentation, I would like to know if I will be allowed to share my screen to check in advance.
Okay, I think Kenza, you can maybe allow Yakuba to share his screen.
Of course.
Okay.
Hi, Yakuba. So,
hi, Kenza.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. Yeah.
Great. So, Yakuba, I can see that you are already on the panelists list. So, if you could go to, you should have a green button in the middle which share the screen. So you could share your screen there, or we could also share it on our side if you would like. Would you like us to share your presentation on our side? Yakuba, I can't hear you.
Unmute my
Oh, okay. No problem at all. Would you like us to share?
Okay, I share audio with Samsung, but I can share again with you.
Okay, yes, I have already received the presentation. So would you like to share it from your screen, or would you like us to share it from our screen?
Okay, I will do it from my screen. And when I click on share.
Yes.
Okay. Ok, now it's... Alors, Roberto, pardon, je suis en réunion avec l'Union africaine, c'est une seconde, je vais te rejoindre à midi. Ok, merci, à plus. Ciao. Ok, sorry.
No problem at all.
Yeah, and then show all windows, and then...
Yakuba, otherwise I will ask my colleague Hanan to share, and whenever you want to move from one slide to the other, you can just say next.
Okay.
If that is okay. All right. Great, Yakuba. So Hanan, could you please go ahead and share Yakuba's presentation? Thank you very much. Okay, so it's exactly past 10 now. So Brian, over to you. Perhaps if you could, if you would like to open this third day and then give the mic to Yakuba Diallo to start the presentation. Thank you very much, dear participants. I hope that you will enjoy this third day of the online school. All the best to all the presenters. Over to you, Brian.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kenza. Thank you so much, participants, for staying with us from the first day, the second day, that is yesterday, and today, where we've been learning on various topics. That is, we started with the population and housing censuses. Then yesterday, we looked at the various estimation methods. And then today, we are going to look at two items, mainly focusing on migration data, that is to to be specific, on labor migration statistics, and also a special focus on children and gender. So in today's sessions, we'll have 3 sessions with 3 modules. That is in module 5 on guidelines concerning statistics of international labor migration, module 6 on enhancing labor migration data for strong labor migration governance and integration in Africa. And then later on, we'll have a break, and then we'll come back for another session on children and gender with our experts from UNICEF and also GIMDAC. Before we begin, I would like to remind our participants that during the presentation, you have the privilege to also share your questions in the Q&A tab, so that we can be able to respond to them after the end of the presentations, or even after the end of the meeting. We can get back to you in case we didn't respond during the meeting. So without taking much time, so our first presenter will be Yakuba Diallo, who is the Principal Statistician, International Labour Organization, will present to us the guidelines concerning statistics of international labor migration. So Yakuba, thank you. Let me check whether you can hear me, Yakuba.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I can hear you and I can see you. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you, colleagues. It's a good opportunity, and it's always a pleasure from ILO's side to collaborate with African Union and IOM, GEM, DSC, and also Statistics Sweden for this second edition of the school on of the African School on Migration Statistics. As said by Brian, the presentation is on the guideline concerning statistics of international labor migration. This guideline have been adopted 2018 during the 20th International Labor Conference of Statisticians in Geneva. And I remember for the first time the African Union attended and also support several countries from Africa, from Ministry of Labor, but also from statistical offices to attend this meeting. The ICLS, the International Conference of Labor Statisticians, is, I think, is good to inform. I think most of you are familiar, but some of us may not be informed of this body. Is the technical body to decide and discuss on labor statistics in terms of resolution and also guideline. And this ICLS adopt some resolution on concept, definition, measurement, but also some guideline. And for the first time in 2018, this guideline was adopted. And this guideline, when it's adopted, is not only ILO guidelines, it becomes international guideline because the discussion is not only ILO, but it's all members of ILO, but also workers, employers contributed to the discussion. And for the first time, there were almost 35 countries from Africa contributing to this discussion to adopt the first guideline concerning statistics of international labor migration. And finally, on the ICLS, ICLS started for the first time 1923, and it's every 5 years almost there is this ICLS, International Conference of Labor Statisticians, to discuss different standard and also a measurement issue related to labor statistics, including labor migration statistics. And in 2 years, there will be a centenary of this ICLS, and we hope AU will continue to collaborate with other partners to have more African countries to participate, but also to contribute to different discussion. The outline of this presentation will focus on a key area. Next slide will be on 6 parts. First, what are the objective and scope of this guideline? And then some key concept and definition. As you know, in this area of migration and also beyond general migration, labor migration, is good to clarify some concept and definition for comparability, but also for measurement issue. And then the classification of this concept and this some key indicators, how they can be used and be also used in terms of a different category or classification. The 4 part of this presentation will be on some key statistics and core indicators derived from the guideline on labor migration statistics. Then follow the data collection and measurement issue. What are the different data sources? And finally, feature action from ILO side, but also some key partners, member states, to work on this guideline in terms of implementation, but also any adjustment, because in the next International Labour Conference of Statisticians to be held in 2 years, the ILO will report on what has been done from 2018, from the adoption to now. And it would be good also to reflect all the feedback from data users, but also data producers on this new guideline. Next. I will start with the key basic concept before some information on the scope and objective. In terms of basic concept in this area, in the guideline, you have a definition of usual resident, resident population, country of measurement, and also international migrant, international labor migrant, for work international migrant, return international migrant. These are key concepts in this guideline with a clear definition. Some of the definition are the same as the one used by UN, as this, like the international migrant or usual resident or resident population. This have been used as presented by UN different recommendations, and we know that also these are under revision. But in 2018, the definition of international labor migrant refer to a UN recommendation related to resident population, usual resident, international migrant. This was used. There are also some of the definition on employment, in employment, workers, based on previous resolution adopted by ICLS on how to define employment in employment. Because the subject of international labor migrant refer to two areas, migration and the labor, because there is a need to have an attachment to labor so that you can be qualified as international labor migrant. But this, in the presentation, you will see in details some of these definition or also criteria. Next. The main objective of this guideline is to support countries in developing the national statistics on labor migration. Another objective here is to facilitate any international comparability and evaluation of migration magnitude, trend, pattern in different countries or regions. And the third objective is to facilitate also an assessment of the condition of work of international migrant workers. These are the key objective and scope of this guideline to support countries in developing their national statistics in this area of labor migration, and also to facilitate comparability across countries, because concept and definition are being harmonized and also key indicators are being defined. Next. And in terms of coverage, it's good also to highlight the situation of refugees and asylum seekers, how they are being defined, also treated or used in this guideline. If you refer to this guideline, paragraph 1 to 10, the first 10 paragraphs, you have a clear definition of usual residence, and referring to refugees, they will be considered if they are part of the usual resident of the country, regardless of sex, country of origin, of nationality. Because one of the key criteria will be the reference population, but also the criteria related to usual resident of the country. And if this is just an example, it's not focused on refugees, but some of the issue raised sometimes is to know if a refugee can be migrant workers. It will depend on the residence of these refugees. Because the reference population include persons who are not, sometimes persons who are not also usual resident in the country, but they have some relationship or connection to the labor force. These are for some specific areas, countries, where neighboring countries, there will be some resident and there are a possibility to be part of a labor force in another country. Next, please. And in this guideline, there are three main concepts used to refer to international labor migration. There is the concept of international migrant workers, but also the concept of for work international migrant, and the concept of return international migrant workers. These three concepts are used to refer to international labor migration. And when we refer to international migrant workers in this guideline, there are two components. And if you have the guideline, the paragraph 14, you have paragraph 14A, 14B, defining clearly usual resident and also non-resident foreign workers who can also meet the criteria to be part of international migrant workers. And return international migrant workers also are defined to be part of the concept of international labor migration. These three concepts are key and they are clearly defined how they can be part of international labor migration. I know that in most of the measurement issue, we refer to international migrant workers, but beyond international migrant workers, there are also return international migrant workers. There are also for-work international migrants, and these are the three concepts used in the guideline and called international labor migration. Next, please. You will see in, again, as I said, international migrant, we refer to the concept of usual resident of the country. Because according to this definition, what is one of the key criteria is if a resident of a country who have ever changed their country of usual residence. But we know that for the purpose of practical measurement in different statistical offices, we refer to foreign-born population, place of birth located in another country, or foreign population. This means that non-citizen or citizen of another country. These are for practical measurement regarding international migrant. The next. And as I said, from international migrant to be qualified as international migrant workers, this means that there is an attachment to labor. And the key criteria here for all persons of working age who are present in the country of measurement is first to be usual resident in a country, but also to have labor attachment. And labor attachment here refer to persons who are either in employment or looking or seeking for a job. These are the criteria to be used as labor attachment. It's not only people in employment, but if the migration purpose is to undertake a job or to look for a job, you are also part of these international migrant workers according to this guideline. Next. In the guideline, you will see this framework where the measurement framework of international migrant workers. You will see it refers to labor force, and according to international standard, labor force is the population in employment, but also the population in employment. If the both category of which form the labor force. And the labor attachment refer to these two components, to be in employment or in employment. And then the usual residence, if you are usual resident or not. Next, please. These are some specific examples of international migrant workers. Just some example. Working refugees or displaced person, irrespective of authorization to work, they can be part of international migrant workers. And then there are foreign domestic workers also can be part of international migrant workers. Some frontier workers also can be part of international migrant workers. These are just some examples. But international migrant workers exclude foreign military, like a UN peace in a country, or diplomatic personnel, call center staff, international traveler on tourist trip. These are some categories excluded from the international migrant workers according to this guideline. Next, please. And beyond the concept, let's say the international migrant workers, there is also the concept of for work international migrant. This refer to measure the movement of person from one country to another for the purpose of undertaking or seeking work. And this is a second concept used in the guideline also. Next, please. And the third concept is return international migrant. And this concept and the idea here is to measure the work experience of person returning after being international migrant workers abroad. This is a third concept, return international migrant. But also the concept of migrant workers covered by the guideline. The next, please. Regarding the classification of international labor migration, they can be classified in terms of entry and exit, but also when we refer to duration of the stay in the country of labor attachment. This is for the analysis. Or we can also refer to permanent or temporary nature. These are the criteria can be used to classify international labor migration. The three concepts I defined: international migrant workers, for work international migrant, but also return international migrant workers. You can refer to some criteria, the duration, the nature, but also if there is entry or exit of international migrant workers, and you can use this criteria to have some classification.
Et là, on peut voir cette classification.
Sorry, okay, sorry. Next, please. There are some detail on classification. I think we will have the material. We don't need to go on this detail. Next, please. Again, next. Okay, and next. Okay, here, these are the key statistics of stock and flow, because when we refer to international labor migration statistics, it's good to know that this is to provide information on the number, but also on changes in migration status and work status if I refer to international migrant workers, it's good to know the stock of international migrant workers, but also inflow of international migrant workers, but also the outflow of international migrant workers. And for work international migrant, there is an indicator related to inflow for work international migrant. And return international migrant workers, there are also indicators related to stock, inflow, and outflow. These are the statistics of stock and flow related to these three indicators defined, covered by the guideline on international labor migration statistics. Next. You'll see some core indicators. Again, I refer to these key three indicators defined in the guideline: international migrant workers, for work international migrant, and also return international migrant workers. These are some core indicators defined in the guideline. If you refer to migrant workers, the stock of international migrant workers, labor force participation rate, employment to population ratio, and unemployment rate of international migrant. Next, please. And the data collection. This is very important, and also for our member state and RECs here. The data collection was covered in the guideline. You see there are, as we know, there are different sources of data, and it's good to highlight the key source of labor migration statistics and data. Next. In the guideline, it's clear that there are different sources of data. Each data has some advantage, but also some limitation. And it's recommended to combine to have a comprehensive information on statistics and data related to labor migration. Because you have some source which can be used to generate information on stock. But there are other sources more reliable to generate flow. And you have some source which can be used to generate both flow and stock. And it's good to know this type of source of stock or flow or both when you have any plan to develop your labor migration statistics. Next. And to have more time for discussion, because of a time constraint, I will be brief in the presentation, but we have time, as said by the moderator, Brian. We will continue, we can answer most of the questions raised here, but beyond this summer school also, we are available to interact with any partners, with any member state or RECs in this area. When this guideline were adopted in 2018, we know that this guideline do not solve all the issues related to labor migration statistics. And for this reason there is, it was decided to continue some methodological work, countries, social partners, and also all partners in terms of dissemination. This is a good opportunity, but also in terms of practice, some of the countries have been in a position to assess the practice they have, national practice they have, and compare to the guideline. From 2019 to now, in North Africa mainly, ILO support or work closely with some SASCAL offices in Mauritania, in Morocco, Tunisia, and now we plan to do similar work in Egypt to look at national practices in labor migration statistics compared to the guideline. This means that to look at the definition, the concept, but also the indicators used in countries and see the discrepancies or commonality with the guideline. And then based on this assessment, we are in a position to advise what needs to be done, because at the end, what is important is to establish an integrated labor migration statistic or system in the country. And this can go also beyond labor migration statistics and be part of international or any ILMS, labor migration statistics or labor market information, labor market information system in the country. And to come up to this labor market information system, including labor migration statistics, some concept, definition, coverage, classification, standards need to be discussed, harmonized, and also coordination between data producers and users, but also some labels, some source of data such as census or module attached to household survey, can be labor force survey or any other household survey, need to be discussed also. And from ILO side, we also have some technical assistance to support labor migration statistics in terms of implementing this guideline by member state, but also in 2 years, we will report to the future session of ICLS, International Conference of Labor Statisticians, what we have learned in terms of national practices in this area of international labor migration statistics, but also if there is any adjustment or any further technical work to be done in this area of labor migration statistics. I will stop here for this presentation so that we have time to interact and respond to some questions. And I thank you for your good attention. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Yakuba, for the wonderful presentation that you've shared with us on the guidelines concerning statistics on international labor migration. Thank you for the good coverage within that you've seen in terms of the frameworks, the concepts, the guidelines, and how best we can do to integrate the ICLS recommendations when you are when we are working on labor migration statistics. Thank you so much. So now I just want to check whether we have any questions for Yakuba to answer before we move to the next presentation. Kenza, maybe you can help me if we have any question for Yakuba.
Yes, of course. So I don't see, thank you very much, Brian, for moderating, and thank you very much, Yakuba, for this excellent presentation. It's been a very good one. So in terms of questions, I don't see any question on the Q&A bar. And the same in the chat, of course, related to Yakuba's presentation. That being said, what we could do is carry on taking questions in the chat and still get back to the participants later on. I see that someone has raised their hands in the attendees list. So Suhaira, if you don't mind, could you please write perhaps the question or the comment that you have in the chat list, in the chat bar, so that we could attend to it and forward it to Yakuba. But so far we don't have anything.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you so much, Kenza, for that. Thank you so much, Kenza, for that and for supporting this. And for Yakuba, thank you for the wonderful presentation. Looks like our participants followed your presentation very well. But just a quick reminder, if you have any question or any clarification from our presenter, please don't hesitate to write on the Q&A or just share your insights with one of the technical team or that is supporting this second edition of the online school. So having finished the first presentation, now we have pleasure to go to the second module, that is module 6, on enhancing labor migration data for strong labor migration governance and integration in Africa. So this presentation, I'll do the presentation for this module. So just a moment, I'll be sharing my screen. Okay, Kenza?
Yes, Brian.
Okay, great, thank you.
So you would like me to share the presentation, huh?
Let me share from my end.
Okay, great.
Okay. Okay. I hope you can see my screen.
Very well, Brian.
Okay, great, great. Thank you. Now, on this session, we want to look at how best we can enhance labor migration governance and integration in Africa with a specific focus on labor migration. So quickly, I'll go through the introduction and I'll go through a few other items that is in terms of the policies, the challenges, and the recommendations that we can follow so that you can have better collection, better analysis, and better dissemination of labor migration statistics in Africa. So having seen the guidelines from our previous presenter, Yakuba, on international labor migration. So my focus will be just on how best we can strengthen the processes of data collection, how best we can strengthen the collected data to be used for policy development, and what are the challenges that we are experiencing and how can we overcome them? And in terms of policy, what are the recommendations that we have so that we can have these processes synchronized from not only from data collection, but also to the utilization of the data that you are collecting for better policy development. So essentially, we have that when we have reliable labor migration data, the implementation of responsible labor migration policies will be facilitated or will be very effective because we already have this information available. But if we miss this information, then there is a very big problem on how we can implement a responsive labor migration. One important aspect we have to consider in this is that the information needs to be collected and analyzed in a timely manner, considering that we are collecting reliable and accurate data for labor migration. So why are we collecting this? So that when we have this information, we can be able to analyze and assess which areas that need intervention so that we can ensure the migrant workers' rights and are protected, that is together with their families in both the countries of origin and countries of destination. This will also help us to understand how best we can stimulate development potentials and benefits of migration and show this to both the countries of origin and destination so that the level of integration is well catered for in both countries without having any hitches or any problems. So in terms of policies, there's quite a number of policies that we have both at the African Union Commission and also at the global agenda that are looking at how best we can have labor migration governance in the continent. And these policies are advocating for safe, orderly, and regular migration of migrants and migrant workers across the board. So we have the new migration policy framework for Africa. One of the priority areas is on labor migration governance and also migration governance in general, where the overarching objective of this policy is to have safe, orderly, and regular migration of migrant workers. This policy also advocates for good quality data that is collected from member states that is also very reliable, so that these policies that are going to be developed are evidence-based and can support member states to develop better policies. Then we have the Ouagadougou Declaration and Plan of Action on Poverty and Employment, Promotion of and Poverty Alleviation. We normally call this OAGA Plus 10. This policy was adopted by the AU member states and the heads of member states so that it can promote better migration governance, promote better governance in terms of representation of women and the youth in the work, that is employment or industry, so that they can be able, because these groups are considered to be vulnerable, especially women and youth. And if we don't have reliable policies or reliable strategies to manage these processes, then it will be a challenge. So it advocates for better employment opportunities and decent work for these vulnerable groups. And it's from this declaration that in one of the priorities, that is priority and area number 5, we have labor migration governance and regional integration being advocated for, and from which we also have the joint labor migration program being developed from. So together, these two policies also advocate for a better labor migration governance from member states and also the stakeholders, so that we can cater for migrant workers' rights, benefits and social security benefits. The Joint Labor Migration Program also, this was adopted in 2015 by the heads of states to spearhead the labor migration governance and regional integration in Africa. Then we also have the Protocol on Free Movement of Persons and Right, which advocates for right of residence and establishment of all persons across Africa. So if we have people moving, and then whichever country they are moved to, they should have the right of residence and right of establishment, so that they can be able to have better opportunities and better livelihoods. Then we also have the Agenda 2063, and which advocates for better prosperity and integration and also governance in Africa, and the SDG Agenda 2030, and also the Global Compact for Migration, which advocates for collection and use of accurate statistics for development of evidence-based policies. So all these policies that I've mentioned, they advocate for the rights of migrant workers, advocate for better data collection, advocate for decent work, and advocate for safe and orderly movement of migrants across the regions, not only in Africa, but across the board. Then I just want to give you a brief presentation in terms of the trends of labor migration in Africa. Currently, the trend of labor migration is still increasing over decades. We can see from, for example, from 2010 to 2019, there is an increase of 53% of labor migrants in Africa. So there were a total of 26.3 million international migrants, of which 20.2 were of working age, and 14.3 were international migrant workers. But of this, we can see that of the international migrant workers, we can see that 6.7 of this is contains the youth. In terms of remittances, we can see that there is also a very big impact when it comes to migrant workers, with a total of 86.4 billion in remittances being transmitted, that is in 2019. So the trend is still increasing. This is the one that is prompting member states and heads of member states to advocate for better labor migration governance and better development of policies. Then now I just want us to look at in terms of how we are collecting labor migration data for policy development. Which variables are we collecting, why, and which areas are of intervention, and where are they being collected for this purpose. So in this table, we can see that if, for example, we are collecting disaggregated data, that is in terms of age, gender, ethnicity, language, migratory status, and the literacy of migrants. What is the purpose of collecting this information? For the countries of origin, we look at this in terms of developing appropriate gender recruitment and employment policies, so that it can cater for all for both sexes, in terms of, we know the vulnerability that is accounted for women and the representation in the employment sector, so that better measures can be done to advocate for more inclusion of women and also other vulnerable groups. And then we also look at having more targeted campaigns to reach out the potential migrants of maybe a specific class that you want to improve or to want to target. So it will be easy for you to identify that group and then be able to strategize and put your potential on target for these migrants. What about the countries of destination? When you look at this for this disaggregating data in terms of these variables, for the country of destination, we want to see that their gender sensitive policies developed relate to the working and living conditions of migrant workers in their countries of destination. We also, they will also support the countries of destination in terms of provision of services and develop materials. Majorly, for example, if we have identified that a particular group or a particular group of migrant workers, there will be language barrier, for example, in the country of destination. Then the materials can be developed to train or to try to train these migrant workers on how best they can understand this language, and this will help them integrate well with the employers and also with the community in which they live. When we look at also at the education, skills, competence in technology, socioeconomic sectors, and occupation, we want to see that these variables help the countries of origin to diversify and develop gender-sensitive policies, which will assist the migrant workers in terms of vocational skills and training or upskilling their level of education or the skills and competencies in areas that they are working on. For the countries of destination, we want to see that these variables help them in terms of development of occupation skills, training, utilizing the sectoral approach in which the migrant workers are employed. And for both, we also want to see that these variables support the skills training, accreditation, and mutual recognition of agreements. We all know that not all migrant workers who move to maybe the country of destination and their skills are recognized. So if we have these variables, then it's easy to target that and have that mutual and support that mutual recognition of skills so that it's easy to for migrant workers to move to these countries. Then we also look at the year of movement, reason, and motivation for migration and status of employment. This will help the countries of origin to address negative drivers of migration by looking at why migrants are moving, and also it will help them in terms of forecasting migration trends from the countries of origin. For countries of destination, they can develop better policies related to the migrants in terms of how long they are going to stay, in terms of giving them permits, and also the residency rights that they are eligible to. Through this also, they can also have assess the migrant workers, whether they can be able to, they are eligible for social security benefits. And if they're not, then they can be able to see how they can address the needs of these migrant workers. For both, I think, for both in terms of having these variables, the countries will be able to develop better memorandums of understanding on various labor migration, because if you have these variables and the countries are able to see the trends in which countries migrants are moving more, then it's better for the countries can be able to develop tailored memorandums or agreements so that they can cater for the benefits of migrants and facilitate better movement between the countries of origin and destination. That is for migration corridors. I think that is from origin to destination. For countries of origin, we'll see that this will help them develop or conduct appropriate pre-departure trainings for the migrant workers, that is before they depart to their countries of destination. And this will help them also acquaint them on what they are going to expect, how they're going to work, and also other essential things that they need to know before moving to the countries of destination. And then for the host countries, that is countries of destination, they can help them in terms of development of appropriate post-arrival trainings for these migrant workers when they arrive. And then also they can help develop integration and social cohesion policies, also in terms of planning for the essential services. For both countries of origin and destination, then we can see that these countries can explore better mechanisms of extending social security protection benefit, social security protection and benefits to migrant workers, and also development of bilateral labor agreements. Now let's look at the main sources. The main sources of data, labor migration data in the continent are the population census, the labor force, and the household surveys, administrative data, and population registers. I'll not dwell more on this because our speakers from the first session, first day and second day mainly focused on this. So let's look at the challenges. What are the challenges that are hindering us from achieving better labor migration governance and integration in Africa? So one is, you find that it's very difficult to compare labor migration data because we are using different definitions, concepts, and also methodologies. There is also the aspect of data collection, and which is spread over different periods of time. For example, you can find that it's monthly, annually, quarterly, 10-yearly, but this may also not be regular. So you might find that in some instances, they are not collected in a regular manner. So this is also one of the challenges, and a collection of different levels of data. So those of us who were here yesterday were able to see how best we can be able to address some of these through estimation methods, but this is a challenge that we really need to find better methods to solve, so that you can have regular and data that is easily comparable. Then data sharing and accessibility, we know that this is a challenge, especially when it comes to administrative data, and also between agencies producing this information. There is also migration through irregular channels. When you have migrants moving through irregular channels, they are not captured. And this is also one of potential challenge that poses the risk of not capturing all the migrants that you want to have in the labor force. Then reasons for migration change over time. So you'll find that when the people are moving from the countries of origin or destination, sometimes honesty is not being adhered to, and people might move with different reasons, maybe tourism or something, and very few people will indicate this. So, and even if they indicate the correct reason, this, when they arrive at the country of destination, this might change over time. So maybe basing on the reason that was at a particular time might lead to development of policies that are not right. Then we have the private recruitment agencies and enterprises. We know that they are mostly involved in most of our countries in recruitment of migrant workers, and they have their own interest, and sharing this information is not that easy. Then we also have weak coordination mechanisms between producers and users of labor migration data. What are some of the characteristics that we really need for better policy development? I'll not dwell much on this because much has been talked about by our previous presenters. And also we saw this in our first presentation on the guidelines. But quickly, all the information that we need to have for policy development needs to be disaggregated by gender, age, work sector, language, and migratory status, and also should take account of demographic and socioeconomic characteristics, the economic sectors, occupation, skills, and the status in employment. And also there's need for us to consider the working conditions of migrants when we are going to capture this information. The social security coverage, length of stay, and also drivers of labor migration. These are the items that we need to capture for us to develop targeted policies. And also we need to have how to see how or to see the impact of labor migration on both countries of origin and destination. That is in terms of the share of the GDP, their contribution is in terms of the GDP, and in terms of the labor markets, how they're affecting, in terms of job creation, poverty reduction, and human development. All this aspect needs to be considered for us to develop better policies. Now, having looked at the challenges, what we need, what are the recommendations? What are some of the recommendations that we need to, in order to have these policies? We need to adopt standardized definitions, concepts, and methodologies on labor migration statistics. This has been stressed from before, and I'll not dwell much on that. Enhance capacity building to support stakeholders, more especially those who are entitled to collect, analyze, and disseminate labor migration data. And this should be done according to the international standards and the guidelines that we saw from Yakuba. Then we also have improved coordination and cooperation. This will help both the countries of origin and destination to understand what type of information they need to collect, how best they can harmonize data collection mechanisms, and also not only between countries of origin and destination, but also even amongst the agencies at national level to have better information. Then we also need to enhance accessibility and dissemination of labor migration data. We also need to mainstream labor migration, that is inclusion of different modules, labor migration modules or questions into the local statistical data systems. That is in terms of censuses, household surveys, and labor force surveys, because having targeted surveys on labor migration, they are very expensive. So if we have modules, then we can increase that frequency of having this information regularly. Then we need to consider ethical data collection, that is in terms of the guidelines, the protection of the data, and the privacy. It needs to be enforced. There's also need to explore innovative ways to collect labor migration data, and also more specifically on irregular migrants. This needs to be captured so that you can be able to assess the impact on the economy. There is also need to for countries to have better coordination in terms of contacting the countries of destination to see appropriate ways in which they can be able to collect data from nationals working abroad. Big data is also another area that needs to be explored, that is in terms of innovation. And then dissemination, we need to look at establishment of a portal or a database for easy dissemination of this, that is the Continental Labor Migration Database. And then this was also mentioned by Yakuba, we need to have well-functioning labor market information systems in order to have labor migration data available or labor market data available to all stakeholders. And this will also foster better coordination amongst all the agencies producing and utilizing labor market data. There's also need to conduct more research to identify potential sources and new data types on labor migration statistics, especially on some of the indicators that have not been collected so far. In terms of policy, I think we have finished in terms of the data recommendation. In terms of policy, there is need to have concrete planning and implementation of effective and mutually reinforcing policies and practices to enhance development potential of labor migration, so that you can empower migrant workers through the migration cycle. So that is from the origin to the country of destination, and also when they return back to their countries. There is also need to put in place good national structures and systems to manage labor migration governance. And also there's need to have better international partnerships and collaborations. This will foster bilateral and multilateral agreements to support labor migration at both countries of origin and destination. And there's also need for our countries to have national policy frameworks on labor migration. This should entail institutional, legislative frameworks, regulatory frameworks, and also foster social dialogue and other consultative processes. So thank you. I think that is the end of my presentation, and these are some of the recommendations we are providing for us to improve a better and have better labor migration governance and integration in Africa. Thank you. Kenza, I don't know whether we have any questions.
Yes, we have actually gotten a certain number of questions. First of all, thank you so much for this very, very interesting presentation. Brian, it is, of course, very important to highlight the fact that it is crucial to bring up the fact that we need to enhance labor migration data collection and use, and not only to collect the data and use it, but also make sure that it is well integrated for the purpose of strong labor migration governance. So thank you very much for the thorough explanation. When it comes to the questions, so I've seen a couple of questions that were on Yakuba's presentation. Actually, they were just posted after Yakuba had left. So I think if Yakuba is with us, I'm going to read out the questions, and if he could also answer that. And there was another question that was asked to both of you, and so I will carry on with the rest. So to Yakuba, there was one question on whether Sierra Leone is part of the development of the guidelines. And another question was, do the guidelines cover citizens living abroad? The third question from Mr. M. Ali, Omar M. Ali, is so it starts with a comment: excellent presentations, Yakuba and Brian. Yesterday, Madame Nedia from Tunisia presented the HIMSS survey that Tunisia conducted. I think, if I am not wrong, that Ethiopia also conducted a migration survey recently, but coupled it with a labor force survey. What do you think about the potential of these combined surveys? So LFS and migration. Thank you. There was another two other questions actually. So one from Paddy Sianga Knudsen. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name. So they said, thanks to Brian and Yakuba for the presentations. How do efforts by partners, IOM and ILO, ensure that we avoid the fatigue on policy improvement, actually see countries implement strategies to deal with persistent issues and better capturing of national, cross-border and regional data to see the changes we need for safe and dignified labor migration within Africa? Beyond partnerships, database and information, do you see the politics, I guess here, will do something to open labor markets that support the AFCFTA, for example. One last question on the Q&A bar is things, good presentations. What are some of the innovative ways to collect irregular migration data? So I just read the questions that were on the Q&A bar, but there were also others on the chat. So perhaps if you could take turns, Yakuba and Brian, in answering these. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Kenza, for sharing this question, and thank you also to member state colleagues for this relevant question. I think I can start, and then my colleague Brian can also add some answers. One of the first question, is it okay for you, Brian?
Go ahead, Yakuba. Thank you.
Okay. Sierra Leone, was Sierra Leone part of the development of the guideline? I will check again, but I think yes, they attended the International Labour Conference in Geneva, but I'm sure that they are being invited, because myself, I sent the statistical office, I sent the invitation letter and to the government statistician, to professor, and then I follow up. But the list of participants of this ICLS is available. I can check again, but we invite Sierra Leone, Minister of Labor, but also the Sierra Leone Statistical Office. The second question, do the guideline cover citizens living abroad? I would say yes. In the guideline, you have this concept, and also the definition is clearly covered in this guideline. The third one related to Nadia Touré presentation on this survey conducted in Tunisia. I know the same similar survey on migration was conducted also in Morocco and Egypt, and some of the Arab states also. I think Jordan. It's a huge program, and this is the second round. And the question is for Ethiopia. I don't know. I cannot confirm if Ethiopia. But the question is, do you think about the potential of this combined survey? Yeah, I would say yes. There are some advantage and potential, and from ILO side, we tried 2 years ago with Nigeria Bureau of Statistics when they conducted the 2019 socioeconomic survey. It's a household survey, and we developed a labor migration module, and we attach to this household survey. And Nigeria was supposed to repeat a similar exercise. One of the challenges in this area is the sampling dimension. If you do not develop or design properly the sample size and also the target group, at the end, it would be difficult to get reliable information and also generate some key indicators. But if the sample design is developed, I hope yesterday I did not have a chance to participate, but on the methodologies, I did not know if this was discussed, but the sampling design is a key aspect to be carefully covered in this area when you attach any labor force survey to migration. Because as you know, migration, the population of migrant may not be the same distribution of labor force survey or other subject. And in some countries, it will be like some elusive population and a specific area. And you need to adjust the sample design to allow you to go to get some key finding. Beyond the sample design, I think it's a good opportunity in terms of getting information on labor migration. And the other question is how do efforts by partners, OIM, ILO, to avoid the fatigue on policy and see countries implement strategy to deal with persistent issue, cross-border data challenge we need, and maybe my colleague Brian will give more information and on this area. But what I can say in terms of political will to open labor markets that support FCFTA, for example, I think so far we have seen a number of, I would say, signature and also a number of commitment for some countries. And for the starting point, I think we personally, I expect this will work, and there will be some possibilities, and AU I think in a better position to respond to this question. But personally, I think I'm optimistic, and I think this FTA can boost most of these activities in our region. What are some of the innovative ways to collect irregular migration data? I think also in this area, AU had some previous session in this domain. And from ILO side, we have a strategy to combine different sources of data, administrative record, data from servers, and also we will try to test this methodology, but we already test methodology in Turkey, but also in another country, and we are trying with Morocco to how we can test also this methodology. And the main idea is to combine different sources of data and come up with a comprehensive information of migration, including irregular and irregular. And we have a strategy, and we are ready and to test in some of the country already. What I can say. Was Kenya part of the compilation of the guideline? Yes, this I can confirm because I remember very well Kenya, and even if I can provide the name because I had a discussion with the KNBS team in Geneva on other issue, and I remember very well the participation of Kenya Bureau of Statistics, but also Minister of Labor from Kenya. And particularly in the case of Kenya, AU, FDB, and ILO were in a position to cover 2 persons, but Kenya invited more than 2 persons, I remember. There was a team of 6 persons from Kenya. This I'm sure, and I have a name. DRC, I've seen that DRC was classified among the top countries where people have request protection for due to their religion. This yeah, Brian, I'm sorry to leave you to some of the difficult question, but I hope you have some response to this question. From my side, I think these are the main question. Maybe I forget some of them. I'm sorry, but I'm available to continue the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Yakumba. I think you've covered most of the questions, and thank you for your excellent response. So from my end, I will respond to a couple of questions that you left. That is in Ethiopia. There was a question by Omar in terms of that is the survey, combination of survey that was done in Ethiopia, that is labor force. And yes, there was a survey that was conducted, but I can't speak for Ethiopia, but I know there is a survey that was conducted. What I know is that the results are not yet out. But as indicated by Yakuba, and as we saw from yesterday's presentation, sampling is key. Survey sampling, the sampling design is key to the success of combining the labor force and migration survey. So if you have a good design and the right sample, then you will have better results. But we need to learn also from the experience from Ethiopia. Once we have the results also, you can use as a baseline. Then a question from Paddy in terms of how do efforts by partners IOM and ILO ensure that we avoid the fatigue on policy improvement and actually see countries implement strategies to deal with persistent issues in better capturing national, cross-border, and regional data to see changes for safe and dignified labor migration in Africa. I can say that on this one, we have an initiative, and one of the initiatives of these institutions and partners and also the AUC is to have a collaboration between all these partners in their support and implementation of the programs in Africa. For example, a good example is the Joint Labor Migration Program, where we have all the partners on board, where we have ILO, we have IOM, and we have UNECA. All these partners have collaborated together and supporting this program on managing and developing policies jointly so that they can tailor the strategies to deal with labor migration at national and regional level, and also at continental level, considering different activities that are being brought or that are being implemented under such kind of programs. So having joint activities and synergies amongst the implementing partners will spearhead this process, and this is our priority, and we are looking at this kind of partnership and support. And sorry, in terms of beyond partnerships that I've spoken about, yes, in terms of political will and implementation of the FCFTA, there is political will, because when you look at the member states who have already signed for this for the SCF CFTA, we have 44 member states signed, and also among us this we have 26 who have ratified. So showing that that issue of opening the labor markets to support this initiative is going on well. We hope that all member states will sign and ratify this. And then another question that I haven't responded to, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Kenza?
thank you very much, Yakuba and Brian, for your very comprehensive responses. I have also a couple of questions in the chat bar. There were two questions from Ali Rashid in the chat bar. So I'm just emphasizing this because I know that Mr. Ali Rashid raised his hand earlier and I asked him to write in the chat bar. So he says, hi all, thank you for the fruitful PPTs. As you might know, the part on data harmonization, I guess, is important, especially from different sources, stats and administrative data sources. So is there a case study that can help NSOs to play a key role? And he carried on by saying also, are there guidelines for better coordination between different entities, especially those who are involved in providing administrative data, how to resolve the security issue and the belongingness of data as well. And so then just one last question from another participant. Thanks, Brian. Any suggestions on some innovative ways to capture irregular migration data? Sierra Leone has a big problem with this. Over to you, presenters, and thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Kenza. So I'll start with the first question from Ali Rashid in terms of harmonization of especially when analyzing data from different sources. I think this was well captured by our presenter yesterday on estimation methods. Perhaps maybe I can refer you to that, but what I can say is that because the labor migration data is collected from different sources, that there is need to have a better triangulation and methods to have this by utilizing this strategy so that it can capture and help the NSOs on how they can improve in the collection of labor migration data. And also this will help them through triangulation and looking at the sources, they can be able to assess the reliable data that they can utilize for this process, and the one that can be used or that can be used for production of the statistical system within the country level. Then for coordination, so far, as what I know, what we have between institutions in terms of administrative data sharing is MOUs. MOUs are the ones that we have between agencies that are sharing this information, are the ones they are signing the MOUs, and also data sharing protocols among us, the agencies. So these are the key drivers so far that are driving the issue of data sharing amongst agencies. And the issue of security, I think it will revolves around the confidentiality and privacy and utilization of this information. So I don't have a specific way on how to resolve this, but this is key between partners, that is producers and users, to have that level of trust and confidentiality on how they can utilize this information, so that they can enforce confidence in how the data is utilized, but this can be handled through consultative processes and signing of MOUs, data sharing protocols, and data privacy protocols, because I know this differs from country to country because there are different frameworks and different policies regarding data privacy and security. For irregular migration, so far, I can't recommend any specific way to capture irregular data migration, because we know this is a tall order for all of us. But there are some studies that are being conducted on how best we can capture this, and maybe we can share any suggestions or best practices once we have this. So I think that is all. Maybe the other questions between me and Yakuba, we can respond in the interest of time. We can respond to our participants and in writing, and also we can get back to them. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You want to come in?
Yeah, I can add.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And Mr. Ali Nashidia is a very key question, and on harmonization of different sources of data. In addition to what was said by my colleague, I think yesterday there was a presentation on that, but from ILO's side, we develop a strategy and to combine different sources of data. Last year, we had an opportunity during the International Forum on Migration Statistics in Cairo to present these methodologies based on different sources of data. We already tested this methodology in 2 countries, and we are available also to support any country in this area. The main element of this strategy is first to analyze the data from existing source, can be alone or in combination, to study the limit of each source with respect to statistics of international labor migration. And then we develop and test new measurement tools and sampling procedure able to capture significant and representative sample of the elusive migrant population, often covered partly or not at all in conventional censuses and sample survey. This was the 2 main elements of this strategy. For instance, from existing data sources, we respond to some of the questions, such as how many international migrant workers are outside the scope of the labor force survey, or to what extent the LFS sample adequately represent the within scope international migrant workers. And based on that, we compute the proportion we compute some of the figures, and then we reconcile different sources of data to get a comprehensive information on international labor migration. Particularly, we make a comparison on labor force survey estimate of international migrant workers and corresponding administrative data also at country level, and see how we can combine these two sources of data. And as I said, we already have a strategy. We test at this in 2 countries, and we are in consultation with Morocco Statistical Office if we can use and also test again these techniques to reconcile different sources of data and come up with a comprehensive data and statistics on international labor migration statistics. This is what I can add to what was already said and presented on this issue of harmonization. This is a very key from AU at continental level under SHASA 1 and 2. There is really a need to harmonize different sources of data, particularly in the area of migration. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Yakuba, for that feedback. So in the interest of time, I think we'll respond to our to the other questions that we are receiving on this area. We see that there is so much interest on it, and we'll keep responding to our participants on the same. We will respond to you on your questions. So we encourage you to put more questions on the Q&A, and we respond to you. Thank you. So right now we are going to go for a quick session, that is a break. Then when we come back, we'll have a chance to go more on migration data, but a special focus on children and gender. So we have, maybe you can break for the next 10 minutes, 13 minutes. So we'll be back at 4 p.m. Addis time. That is at 12 p.m. Tunis time. So let's get back in the next 12 minutes for the next session. Thank you. Welcome back. Welcome back, our participants, for the last session. Quickly, before we start the session, in this session, we are going to have a special focus on children and gender. And we'll have two sessions. The first session will be handled by Jan Base, and then the second session will be handled by Wala and Ines. So sorry if I pronounce your names incorrectly. Okay, so I just want to check with our presenters if they're available. Jan Base, Jan?
Yes, I'm available. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Yes, I can hear you. I can see you. Thank you. Then we have our next presenter is Wala and Ines. So first, our two presenters, the other presenters, are you available? Let me check.
Yes, Brian,
Okay,
they are
great.
available, and they have been upgraded to panelists. So all the remaining presenters are here with us.
Thank you, Kenza.
Sure.
Okay, so then you have a floor. Okay, thank you. You can go ahead.
Thank you very much. So quickly checking, do I share my screen or do you play the slides?
Yes, Jan, please go ahead and share your screen.
Okay.
Thank you.
So,
I think we might have lost Jan. Jan, are you still with us? So it seems like Jan is having technical difficulties at the moment. So we could wait for 2 more minutes. Otherwise, since we have the next presenters ready with us, we could go to the last presentation on the agenda, then come back to Jan, if that is okay with everyone, of course.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Let me check with our presenters, the two presenters focusing on gender.
hello, I'm back here.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what happened. I shared my screen and I lost the connection. Can you share from your side, maybe? I'm sorry for this.
Okay, sure. We could share on our side, Jan.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what happened. I shared it and then put it into.
So my colleague Hanan is currently sharing. Thank you so much, Hanan. And Jan, whenever you would like to go to the next slide, just feel free to say next.
Yes.
All the best. Thank you.
Thank you. I have now arranged. I'm sorry for this delay. So, okay, now I see. So first, thank you very much for the organizers to invite us from UNICEF to the school, which is very interesting. I mean, I had the chance to see a couple of module sessions over the last days, so I learned a lot. So I thank you very much for this. In this presentation, I would like to really show the perspective of children in this topic of migration statistics. And before I come to the point why the perspective is special and justifies special consideration, let's have a look on some numbers to understand the scope of the phenomenon. So globally, there are 281 million migrants as of 2020, and of them 36 million are children. In Africa, we have, which this chart shows, we have 25 million migrants in total, and around 6 million of them are children. And you can see an increasing trend. Also, the overall migrant stock was comparatively stable from the 1990s to 2010. We can see a steep increase in migrants living in Africa. If I say talk about 6 million children among the international migrant stock, we have to consider that Africa has a bit special situation because we have many refugees among those. So we have 3.8, almost 4 million refugee children among these 6 million migrants. Can we go to the next slide, please? In total, 1 in 4 migrants in Africa is a child. Globally, it's 1 in 8. So this reflects a bit, this higher share of children reflects a bit, it's a reflection a bit of the higher share of refugees, which have traditionally a younger age structure than the general migrant population. In total, there are 41 million African migrants. This means migrants from Africa, which corresponds to approximately 14% of the global migrant stock. Around half of these migrants from Africa stay within Africa, which you can see a bit on the right side. You see these big arrows coming from Western Africa, Middle Africa, Eastern Africa, going back into the same region, sub-region in Africa, or go to one of the other regions in Africa. The exception is Northern Africa, where you have a big part of the emigration leading to Europe or Asia, which is mostly in the Middle East. So this means that if you look at sub-Saharan Africa only, it's 7 out of 10 migrants stay within Africa. So we have a huge migration patterns within the region. Next slide, please. But there are also millions of children living in forced displacement. So as of 2019, globally, there were 33 million children displaced as a result of conflict and violence. In Africa, it were 14 million children being displaced as a result of conflict or violence, either as refugees across borders, which are refugees, or internally in their own country, which is almost 10 million in the case of Africa. Then you have another 300,000 asylum seekers, and this comes to 1 in 41 children in Africa was living in forced displacement as of 2019. And on top of this comes another around 1 million displaced of natural disasters. If you go to the next slide, please. As I already mentioned, refugees or children are overrepresented in the displaced population. So you see here around half of refugees in general are children, and around 40% for the internally displaced populations. Globally, 30% of the population are children. And among the international migrants, internationally, you see that children are underrepresented. This has to do with the fact that the peak age of migration is usually in the young adult age for economic reason, for labor migration, and so on. Next slide. So there's a general data scarcity of child-related migration data. Children are often overlooked in the data collection, and there are considerably uncertainties when it comes to knowledge about them. And this has consequences in the responses we can give in policy-based or in protection issues, because if we don't know where the children are or how many there are, it's difficult to formulate any evidence-based policies. If you look globally, only 1 in 5 countries or territories do not aggregate their migrant stock data, the migrant data by age. In Africa, this is even a higher percentage. Sub-Saharan Africa, this is even 1 in 3, 35%. 2 in 5 countries with data on refugees do not have information on age. This usually is it's better situation in Africa because UNHCR is responsible for the data collection. It's usually not so good if countries themselves are reporting. And it's even worse if you go to the internally displaced children, where we have where we see that over 4 in 5 countries have do not disaggregate the data of the internally displaced population by age. Next slide, please. So why is it important to know more about children on the move? There's of course, there's for one the topic of protection. Migrants are already per se a vulnerable group, which has to do with maybe the differences in language, the lack of network, often living in socio-economic insecurity, maybe even some legal insecurity. But children are particularly vulnerable among those already vulnerable populations, since the lack of power, which makes them at a higher risk of exploitation or trafficking, or being simply overlooked for other areas. Then there are the child's rights, which have to get protected. And this is the child's rights are most closely described in the Convention on the Rights of the Child, or short CRC, which is a convention which got adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1989, and is, by the way, also the most widely ratified human rights treaty in history. This convention has influenced national laws and policies to make investments so that more children receive nutrition, healthcare, education, and protection they need to survive and to reach also their full potential. And thirdly, it's about services. And one of the most important services for children, besides access to health, is education. Education is a major driver of migration. Every child has a right to go to school and to learn. And regardless of the legal status, the nationality, and citizenship. And yet, huge numbers of migrant and displaced children are out of school. Only half of the around 13 million child refugees are enrolled in primary school, and even less than 1/4 in secondary school, and just 1% in college or university. And also, only a tiny fraction of them are enrolled in early childhood development. In a recent poll conducted by UNICEF, 58% of self-described or self-identified young people aged 14 to 20 who self-identified as migrants or refugees reported that they have lost 1 or more years of school due to as consequence of their mobility. Next slide. I want to give here one example also for the area of protection, and data. Available data can reveal vulnerabilities. This here shows it's an example to show how migration data can be used to find vulnerabilities, which then can be the basics for or the groundwork for evidence-based actions and policies. These data come from, or the underlying data are collected from IOM's Flow Monitoring Survey in 2016 and 2017 in the aftermath of of Europe's 2015 refugee crisis. And the slide shows the predicted probability of migrants on the route to Europe, depending on the different characteristics, to experience exploitation. It's the outcome of a statistical model. So if we start from the left side, for any migrant, the risk of experiencing on their journey exploitation was 71%. If they came from sub-Saharan Africa, the risk increased to 80%, to over 80%. If they came from any other regions in the world or from Northern Africa, the risk was much lower, 49%. And from those who came, or in both groups, the younger age groups, like 14 to 17 in blue, had higher risk of exploitation, or increased the risk, all other things being equal, increased the risk of experiencing exploitation or trafficking on the route. So you can see it for the migrants from sub-Saharan Africa, increased to 84% if they were 14 to 17, compared to 78% for those 25 and older. And if they've been from other regions originating than sub-Saharan Africa, the risk of younger children, 14 to 17, young adolescents, were 10 percentage points higher than those older children. And then we can see that education had an influence, for example. So children, or any kind of persons who had higher education, secondary education, had a more protective, or were more protective of exploitation at a lower risk. So you can see that those characteristics can increase vulnerability or give some kind of protection. And again, if they travel alone on the completely right side, if they travel alone, this indeed again increase the risk for exploitation for every group. Thus, you can see there's a huge difference in the risk of experiencing exploitation depending on where you come from, how old you were, what kind of education you had, and if you're traveling alone or not alone. And this ranged for the same route. It ranged from 89%, so like 9 out of 10 children, or 9 out of 10, children who were under 18, who came from sub-Saharan Africa, had no education, and traveled alone, experienced exploitation, compared to 32% on the same route if they were not from sub-Saharan Africa, if they were older, if they had secondary education, if they're not traveling alone. So knowing these facts can help to really formulate responses to protect the migrants, in particular the migrant children. Next slide. Here's another example from a survey conducted by UNICEF between April 2019 and January 2020 on almost 1,300 migrant children, 14 to 17, and young people 18 to 24. And this relates to the access of services. For example, in the second row, there were 54% of the respondents could use shelter and temporary accommodation, but there were still 26% left who wanted but were unable to find shelter and temporary accommodation. The same for access to health centers or hospital. 47% did use hospitals, but there were again 26% who wanted but were unable to find access. If you look at the last row on education, again, school, there were 41, the majority of the respondents, or the biggest group, 41% reported that they wanted to have access to school, but were unable to do so. Yesterday, we saw some other examples. I think it was in the module on disaggregation of how health and nutrition outcomes were related to migratory status of children or their parents. And this again, this aggregation is needed to find these relationships and then to react to those. Next slide, please. So for children, there are some specific considerations. There are some populations which are specifically to children, or some topics which are really important to children on the move. First, they're unaccompanied minors. They really often go unnoticed. So children traveling unaccompanied can be found on almost all migration routes, and for a variety of reasons. But data about them are difficult to come by with. Reliable numbers usually are available only for specific regions or local situations, such as the apprehension at the US-Mexican border, or asylum-seeking children in Europe. But what's common among them, the majority of them are boys, has probably to do with the periods of the journey. In Europe, you have 9 out of 10 unaccompanied minors are boys. Arrivals in USA is 66%, and unaccompanied minors arriving in South Africa, it's around 70%. Trafficking and smuggling. Among detected victims of trafficking, about 1/3 are children. And the share of boys among them detected victims has risen over the years, but still girls outnumber boys 4-3. Immigration detention is an important topic. It violates the child's rights. In more and more countries prohibit detention of children, but still too many children are held in immigration detention. And UNICEF is propagating for alternative services for such cases. Family reunification, important for children, it can relate both to children separated during journeys or those who started alone to join families in destination countries. Integration, how well they're integrated. Again, do they have access to important services, not least education? Do they have the same chances? And finally, xenophobia, the discrimination is an important topic, especially for the vulnerable ages, because of language, maybe, or because of different cultural backgrounds. This can cause really lasting damage for children. And lastly, children left behind by parents migrating for work. And these can have different effects, or what kind of effects this can have on children depends on the situation, but there's a huge group of those children in the world. Next slide, please. UNICEF has, in reflection of those observations, UNICEF has 6 policy asks for children on the move. That's first about the root causes. Protected conflicts, persistent violence, extreme poverty, and disadvantages are one of the main drivers for millions of children leaving their home. Help children on the move to stay in school and stay healthy. I mean, after leaving their homes, many refugee and migrant children miss out on education, as I've showed earlier. And many lack access to healthcare or other essential services. The third ask is to keep families together. Children who are traveling alone or have been separated from their parents are more easily preyed on and are more vulnerable to abuse and violence. And detention for migrant and refugee children. Detention is harmful to children's health and well-being and can really undermine the development. And it's important to develop alternative cares for such situations. Combat xenophobia and discrimination, both on the journey and in their final destinations. And finally, protect children on the move from exploitation and violence. Refugee and migrant children are extremely vulnerable to both of those and to abuse and being preyed on by smugglers or even enslaved by traffickers. Next slide. So what can be done to improve the data on children on the move? First of all, disaggregation is key. We heard this in the previous, in the module yesterday, but also the better use of existing data. Often they do exist in different ministries, in different agencies, but are not used to the full extent. Certainly, new or improved data collection. This can be new data, new indicators to collect, or even adding disaggregation, adding indicators to existing data collection efforts, or really create targeting specific topics on children and collect data on those. Innovation on data collection methods. This can be using GIS, can be telephone surveys, can even be telephone metadata or other big data. Another important aspect is sharing of data. And this is between level of governments, local, regional, national. Often they are siloed, or between national agencies and ministries, but also across borders. And this is in particular importance when we talk about protection of children crossing international borders. And then, of course, sharing of data with international agencies to really know where services have to get provided. And finally, dissemination of data to inform the public and really to allow the development of evidence-based policies. Next slide. There are tools and partners available. We heard from the expert group on refugee and IDP statistic agrees. In module 2, in the first day, is an ongoing initiative producing guidance manuals in close cooperation with countries. IOM, we heard it yesterday in module 4, they published a manual data disaggregation. They also have data capacity building programs. And there is a new initiative, the Integrated Data Ecosystem and Assessment Strengthening Initiative, or IDEAS. Next slide, please. I want to quickly talk about this one, this Integrated Data Ecosystem Assessment and Strengthening Initiative. The objective of this project is jointly developed, was developed in 2018 by UNICEF, IOM, UNHCR, UNSD, Statistics Division, and the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, recognizing the general need for better data on migrants and displaced population in general, but also particularly for children. And the objectives of IDEA is to make a comprehensive national mapping of the existing data, to identify gaps and good practices in national data systems and capacities, and to provide recommendations on how to sustainably enhance the collection, the analysis and use of high quality, timely, and disaggregated data on children on the move on the country level. This is an initiative which really works in countries. We have tools. There are 2 modules. There's a general module. It's a kind of questionnaire. It covers the legal and political settings, the national migration data strategy, explores what kind of basic migration statistics are collected, the disaggregation level, the interagency coordination, if there's any data sharing happening. And we have specific modules on children, which covers aspects of child protection, education, child asylum seekers, detention, and statelessness. And IDEAS was piloted in 2 projects. It was in Thailand in 2019 and in Jordan 2020. And we plan to extend this to more countries, and especially also in the African region. Next slide, please. Finally, I would like to mention also another initiative dealing with data on children on the move. It is the International Data Alliance for Children on the Move, or IDEC in short. IDEC was launched in March 2020, last year, and is jointly led by UNICEF, IOM, UNHCR, OECD, and Eurostat. The International Data Alliance is a cross-sectoral global coalition comprised of governments, including experts from national statistics offices and migration-relevant line ministries, to national and regional organizations, NGOs, think tanks, academics, and civil society. The main objective of IDEC is to improve statistics and data on migrant and forcibly displaced children, with the goal to really support evidence-based policymaking that protects and empowers the children. Next slide. I quickly want to show you the work plan for the next 3 years, 2021 to 2023. One is strengthening the national data systems and capacities to protect migrant forcibly displaced children. The IDEAS project will be part of this. Then to promote and establish collaborative, innovative methods for child-specific data work. So we're exploring what can be done to increase the availability of child-specific data. And finally, to improve data visibility, availability, and usability related to children on the move, and this includes webinars, briefs, and other products. So currently, the IDEC has 38 members. There are 12 UN agencies, including we've also African Union is part of it. We're very proud that African Union joined earlier this year. We have 15 countries, including 5 from Africa, which is Morocco, Egypt, Nigeria, Cameroon, and South Africa. And we have 11 other members, NGOs, think tanks, academia. And coming to the last slide, to show a bit the work of IDEC, we have 4 different working groups, which are populated by the members. So we have the one work groups on data capacity strengthening, with the goal to identify gaps in national data ecosystems and provide solutions and strengthen the general data system. The second working group, indicators development and data, is about identifying and developing indicators linked to SDG, to the Social Development Goals, to the global compacts of migration and migration and refugee, and to develop guidance to improve measurement on child-specific indicators and data. And the third working group is about availability of data on internally displaced children. We have seen that there is a huge gap in terms of even the pure numbers of them, not to speak from how they're faring and their well-being. So this will look at how to disaggregate data on internally displaced children, how to improve the knowledge of the impact of displacement on children on the move, and to improve the availability of information to prevent internal displacement in the first place. And in the last working group, and the fourth one, is on collaboration on innovative methods. So there we are exploring the development of innovative methods, how organizations can collaborate to form partnerships on data, and including academia, and in order to improve the data analysis on children on the move. And with this, I'm finishing and leaving you. Next slide, please. And I leave you here with contact addresses if you want to contact UNICEF, myself, or if you want to have more information on the International Data Alliance, you can send us an email. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jan, for your wonderful presentation on migration data with a special focus on children, looking at different policies on how to improve data collection on children on the move, and the work that is done by IDEC, and also the work plan and that you're looking at to strengthen availability of data on children on the move. Thank you. So I don't know whether we have any question for Jan. I think I see, maybe no, I don't see any question at the moment. Maybe perhaps if we have another question that is addressed to you, we'll maybe we'll request you to stay with us for some time as we finish the last presentation, and then we'll share with you that question, and then you give the feedback to our participants. So now we we are going to move to our next presentation. Our next presentation, that is migration data with a special focus on gender. And we have our two presenters. We are going to do this presentation. Let me check. Ines and Gwala, I don't know whether you are ready. Don't know who's going to start. Yes.
Yes, we are ready to start. I can share my screen.
Okay. Thank you. Welcome.
Share. Allow me to share. Share. Let me know if you see it.
Yes, I can see.
Yes, you see it? Perfect.
Thank you.
So first of all, I would also like to thank the organizers for the opportunity to present today, as well as participants in advance for the interest and their attention. I know very well that this is the last day, last hour, and 20th online presentation. Hence, I'm tripled honored to have your attention today, and I hope at the end of it, you'll agree it's been worth. This presentation is about the importance and how to integrate a gender perspective into migration data work. It draws on the upcoming note from GINDAC on gender and migration data, a guide for evidence-based gender-responsive migration governance that was funded by the German government, and also builds on the presentation that Elisa made yesterday, as well as on some of the points that Jan earlier mentioned that are also of particular importance for gender disaggregation. So you probably asked, first of all, why is important or necessary to ensure gender perspective into migration data work? And well, as we like data, let us share some recent trends that, as you'll see in the screen, as you know, 48% of international migrants are women. Hence, if we do not understand or gather their needs, their hopes, realities, challenges, and opportunities, we will be missing approximately 140 million people in the equation when we prepare for policies, etc. Also, if we look at the regional level, male international migrants significantly outnumber female international migrants in Africa and Asia region as of 2020. For Africa, UNDESA's data said that the share of female migrants in 2020 was 47.1%. But however, between 2000 and 2022 and 2020, the increase in the estimated stock of female international migrants in Africa was slightly higher than the increase in male migrants, 69% vis-a-vis 68%. So we'll see a growing trend of female migration. But integrating a gender responsive data in international migration governance and making sure that all migrants are accounted for does not only make sense from a data and policy perspective. As we all know, it is also aligned with, of course, the human rights-based approach that is key to the 2030 agenda. And of that, of particular relevance are SDGs with cross-cutting themes of migration, development, and gender equality, such as, of course, SDG 5, which has the sole focus on gender equality, and among others, SDG 17.18, 10.7, and 8.8, that are relevant to different aspects of gender responsive migration governance. Moreover, as you surely know, gender responsiveness is also one of the guiding principles of the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, the GCM. And with respect to data, we also have one objective, GCM1, collect and utilize accurate and disaggregated data as a basis for evidence-based policies. And also what we touched upon in our guidance was that last but not least, we also have two very important UN documents, the UN Secretary General Data Strategy, as well as IOM's Migration Strategy. And both of them specifically call for disaggregation of migration data among other characteristics, sex and gender. So as we were saying, integrating a gender perspective is essential to inform evidence-based migration policy that captures the realities of all migrants. Sex disaggregated data include the differentiation of information by sex categories as typically listed on official identification documents, including the option of male, female, and sometimes other designations such as X, depending on the country. Whereas gender disaggregated data is information about an individual's gender identity. It requires respondents to self-identify their gender, which may or may not correspond with the gender that was assigned at birth, or to the gender that was attributed to them by society. Therefore, being gender responsive means understanding and responding to the differences between sex and gender, and recognizing that the categorization on official documents may differ from what individuals self-identify. Disaggregating data by sex is considered a fairly commonplace practice, probably in every country, we would hope. Disaggregating by gender can help uncover the socioeconomic realities of women and other gender diverse people, and to counter gender discrimination. Also, gathering accurate data on gender requires asking individuals about their gender identity and recognizing that gender norms and biases happen both at the individual level and at the structural level, and that they have consequences such as, for example, discrimination, violence, gender inequality, etc. So now, just to make sure that you're still there and following me, please allow me to ask, based on your experience, of your ample experience and perspective, what do you think are the key gaps and challenges around gender when it comes to migration data in your country or globally? And you can please type your thoughts in the chat box so that we can all learn from each other's expertise. It can be a word, it can be a sentence, it can be a paragraph. I would say it can be emoji, but I don't know if emojis are allowed in the chat. But basically, we would like to have this collective learning and sharing, and I'm sure this will be also tracked later on when we look at all the comments in the chat. I'll give you a few seconds for reflection and typing. Again, based on your experience and perspective, what do you think are the key gaps and challenges around gender when it comes to migration data? And as I cannot both share the screen and look at the comments at the same time, my colleague Ines, who is also kindly in this call and is the co-presenter, would maybe read out loud 2 or 3 in the interest of time, if time allows, in the next few seconds, if we get comments immediately. Ines, I don't know if you're there.
Yeah, so if there are any comments or ideas on what have been or are the key gaps and challenges around gender and migration data, if someone wants to share, we will read out loud from the chat.
Exactly. We can leave a few seconds, and if not, we ask participants to please chat eagerly in the question and answers box, and we can otherwise continue with the presentation. And at any point, please do type your thoughts.
We have one comment that mentions that gender data is collected, but no international use. That it's not being used internationally. It's one comment we received for now.
Yes, and actually this is a very good, thank you for whoever did share such thought, because what we did in our note, actually, we analyzed in our research key global population data and also some at national level on international migration by the availability of gender-related data, which in the interest of time, there's a table, but it's a long one. I will not go into it, but it will be available, of course, in our guidance note. But some of the data that we analyzed was, for example, DESA's trends in international migration stock, or also we look at the World Bank migration and remittances data, etc. And we tended to conclude the 5 following key gender gaps and challenges. First, the production and collection of inclusive and gender disaggregated was very varied from, as the person that typed in the chat said, varied from one country to another. So it was difficult to then put those data together and actually make it comparable. Then there was also a lack of intersectional experiences of women and people with diverse gender identities and other intersecting discrimination or characteristics, for example, by disabilities, etc. There were also inconsistencies in the types and frequencies of measurements, so that would make it very difficult to compare. There was fourth, what we saw, there was a lack of capacity in national statistical offices and data systems. And we also saw as fifth general gap that transparency, accountability, and ethics in the way the data was collected, etc., was another of the main gaps. I should have said that apart from analyzing these global population data, we also in our research conducted some key informant interviews to officials and national statistics officers in order to also gather their perspective from the national level. And as I was saying, these five general gender gaps and challenges, we understand the lack of data hinders obviously the achievement of the 2030 agenda objective of leaving no one behind. For example, a lack of data on gender and migration hinders the ability of governments to estimate the contributions of migrant women to the economies both at countries of origin and destination. To the extent, and we also saw that to the extent possible, women shall not be the only or the sole indicator or representation of gender when we mean gender disaggregation. In instances where efforts were made to disaggregate by this data, it was often only focused on women to the exclusion, as I was saying, of migrants with diverse gender identities, including also migrants with different intersecting identities such as disabilities or non-binary gender, etc. So in our research, we also studied the extent to which governments explicitly incorporate the concerns and experiences of all genders in designing, implementing, monitoring, and evaluating the policies, as well as the data used to inform those. And as per the graphic that you have in front of you, it is highly variable, ranging from what we thought would be gender biased to gender responsive. So to give you an idea, for gender biased would be data that produced and reproduced these stereotypes and that it excluded the experiences of all migrants and it would only look at some of them. We also found that there were some gender neutral policies and data collection, and those were data that appear objective but that without intending still produce uneven outcomes for women and people with other gender identities. And in some cases, we found gender responsive data production, which was guided by principles of gender equality and human rights. And it was used to monitor and modify policies towards responding to the gender experiences of migration and also addressing, in general, gender inequality. So without sex and gender disaggregated data, as we mentioned before, policymakers and service providers have no information on the differences in experiences and needs, as well as their level of integration in, for example, the labor market, their contributions to the economy, to the societies as a whole, etc. So once again, understanding these gender and migration trends and gathering more nuanced data on their migration will enable, of course, evidence-based gender responsive policy that responds to the needs of all people on the move. So with this in mind, we wondered, and once again, we wanted to hear your views. This will be the last time for today. So allow me to ask again and type your thoughts in the chat so we can all learn from each other. We wonder what steps can National Statistics Office take to implement a gender-responsive approach to migration data based on what we said before. And again, we'll give a few seconds for reflection and typing. It can be a word, a sentence. Ines, we can't hear you. You're muted.
Yes. Someone has a comment here, and from before, there's an additional comment that you've covered. Estefania mentioned, someone was mentioning that the capacity to collect data is limited and the National Statistical Offices need orientation on what gender data is required to support policy making. And one new comment for this new question is, in my experience working in Djibouti, the only information we collect on gender is limited to the sexual identity, male, female, and our surveys don't cover the wide spectrum of gender identities and are therefore excluded de facto. I think that is the same in many sub-Saharan African countries, if I am not wrong. What are some good practices to overcome this limitation? Thank you, Stefania.
Wow, this is wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much, because this takes us to the next slides. This is amazing. Thanks for all your attention. As I said, extremely honored that you're still there and listening after 3 days of online course. So we came up with 5 broad steps for a gender responsive approach, which is just to respond to the question made by the colleague. And the 5 broad steps, each of them with sub-steps and good examples, can be found, of course, in the guidance note that, as I said, we won't be sharing the link right now because it's upcoming. We're still working on the publication process, copy editing, etc. But will be available very, very soon. So the 5 steps are rethinking on the categorization and formulate gender responsive policy to guide migration data collection and use. Also, again, this depends on the national context. So you would need to think of what gender categories could be allowed in the national context. Also, second step will be, or broad step will be, to integrate ethical considerations in migration data collection. The third step will be building capacities and invest in data infrastructure. Fourth will be collecting and using sex and, whenever possible, gender disaggregation and disaggregated migration data. And the fourth one will be to adopt a whole of society, whole of government approach in data collection, analysis and evaluation. And this is also including even civil society organization, etc. So the first step or broad step will be, as I mentioned, we'll need to rethink the categorization and enhancing the measurement. Since the experiences of migration needs and challenges are closely linked with the sex and gender characteristics of migrants, in addition to sex disaggregated data, it is critically important, whenever possible, to collect data on migrants with diverse gender identities as self-identified. So for that, adopting a multi-methodological approach and integrating qualitative as well as quantitative data can help raising the voices of those that are considered marginalized individuals, and also provide more in-depth information regarding the policies and practices and how they differently impact migrants. Also, formulating a gender-responsive policy to guide the data collection and use could be, for example, developing a gender-responsive policy that speaks to the diverse realities of migrants of all genders, especially those more at risk of marginalization, such as women, girls, people with diverse gender identities with intersecting characteristics of discrimination, etc. An example of that could be, for example, the government of Colombia, which partnered with the UN to produce a structured process on gender statistics. The process has strengthened institutions, the General Statistic Office, but also generating the statistical information established an institutional coordination mechanism to better mainstream the existing data. Jan mentioned before, disaggregating is key, but also using what there is already key too. It's a very, very good and valid first step. Additionally, the government of Colombia developed some training modules, provided technical assistance to the national statistic officers on how to conduct surveys from a gender perspective, etc. And this was already put in place for the 2021 census, economic census in Colombia. The second step or broad step will be also critically important, that migration data is collected, processed, managed, and stored to prevent potential loss, theft, or misuse in line with human rights standards. So data collection must ensure that the privacy of all, including women and those with diversity in their identities, are protected. The use of data anonymization, or for example, firewalls to ensure that data does not include identification information, and that is only used for the purposes other than, that is not used for purposes other than the ones consented by the person. And this is, I would believe, increasingly important in the context of big data and with related issues of digital information sharing, storage, and ownership. And in this regard, we actually had a good practice. We identified a good practice of Ghana, increasing access to and demand for gender data related to health and services among rural women using a mobile technology for community health app. So healthcare providers were also able to record and track care provided to women and newborns, but in an anonymous way, so that would be more, of course, helpful for providers, but not made in any way to discriminate those that were to receive the services. The third broad step will be to build capacities and invest in data infrastructure. So countries could develop specific gender databases from their censuses and mainstream gender in the entire national statistics system. We understand this would necessitate from a gender responsive budgeting that provides sufficient resources. And of course, the end goal of this would be providing such resources in producing, coordinating gender responsive data to contribute to, in general, address gender inequalities, inequalities as a whole, gender-based violence, discrimination, etc., etc. So we'll have an overall global objective. Also, as one of the participants mentioned, would be very important to train and build capacity of policymakers, government officials, and other data actors on gender equality in general, as that would be very much used in order to put in practice all these good measures that we are mentioning. In that regard, as good example, we included, for example, a guide produced by UN Women in 2021, with this a guide to gender responsive implementation of the Global Compact for Migration. And it's a reference document for key stakeholders, including national statistics offices and governments, to provide clear, concrete, and practical guidance, even with practical questions to be asked when collecting data, etc. The fourth general step will be to collect sex and, whenever possible, gender disaggregated migration data, as emphasized in SDG 17.18. Development should capture information on all intersecting factors that produce the gender experiences of migration, and also facilitate access to data transparency, and data sharing, as providing data in a variety of accessible formats, and the standardization of metadata would further enhance data availability and sharing. So as good practice for that, I could mention, for example, IOM's migration data portal, that has a gender and migration webpage, which provides an overview of key terms and concepts, main trends, data sources, etc. As you may know, IOM's data portal was established in 2017 and serves as a unique access point to timely and comprehensive migration statistics and reliable information about migration data globally. My last step will be to adopt a whole of society and whole of government approach, which entails, as I had mentioned before, the involvement of relevant academics and civil society in data collection processes, as well as engagement and relationship building with local communities to encourage the participation, establishing a dialogue, incorporate perspectives in data collection, etc. Of particular importance here, again, will be the inclusion of civil society and voices of women and people with diverse gender identities, if possible, in the data production and collection. So including these gender considerations into policy design and data collection concurrently allows a critical examination of the assumptions and practices that prevent policymakers from asking important questions that are outside our own experiences or understanding. And just to sum up, allow me to recap, this will be my last slide, the key findings from our research and also, I would say, and beyond, is that, of course, gender impacts all the stages and processes of migration for all migrants of all ages, and failing to account for this variability possesses challenges to the reliability, validity, and generalization of statistical estimates. Also that sex and whenever possible, gender disaggregated data will provide important information for responding to the challenges and needs of women and people with diverse gender identities, and also to recognize and enhance the social and economic benefits of migration and their contribution to those. Also that adopting a gender analytical framework in the production, collection, analysis, and use of gender disaggregated data is key to realizing the 2030 agenda and the GCM. And last, that would be that gender responsiveness in the production of migration data can, of course, in turn constitute an integral part of migration governance if well integrated throughout the policy dialogue, and obviously revert into benefits for the entire society. So it's in the benefit of entire countries and also globally to do so. And this is all from my side. I thank you once again for your attention, especially as it was the last presentation of 3 days. Thank you, Ines, also for your kind support in this. I look forward to any comments. If not now, because of in the interest of time, we'll probably need to close, also offline later on. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Stephanie and Ines, for your presentation on gender responsiveness and how we can address migration data with taking into consideration the issues of gender. Thanks for focusing on the key gaps, challenges, and steps and approaches of addressing gender responsive migration data. And also, thank you so much for your final remarks. So I think we are coming to the end of the sessions for today. That is the third day. So I'd like to check whether we have any questions for our presenters, our last presenters on migration, that is focusing on children, and also on gender. So if we have any question, we can take 1 or 2 questions, and then we can go to the closing session. Thank you. Kenza, do you have any questions?
Yes, it's actually perfect because we have 1 question and we're going to try and wrap up. And if any of the other participants would like to ask more questions, please feel free to follow up with our colleagues directly. So, so 1 question / comment, peer-to-peer learning is useful on how others who have taken steps to move towards gender respectiveness. So this would actually be a comment on the, I guess, the question that you asked previously. And yeah, so I don't see any questions so far that would be on this part. So if this is okay with you, I would like to thank you so much for all these presentations, and wrap it up, give the mic back to Brian, and perhaps go to the concluding remarks. Thank you so much, participants, for all the great presentations. Thank you, colleagues, and enjoy the rest of your day. Over to you, Brian.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kenza, and thank you so much to our presenters for today. That is Yakuba, Jan, and Guela and Ines, for your wonderful presentation for this last day. And to our participants, thank you so much for staying with us for the last 3 days, starting from day 1, where we looked at the population and housing censuses and household censuses. Then on day 2, we looked at estimation methods. And today we are looking at migration data with a special focus on labor migration statistics and a focus on children and gender. We really hope that you've got some exciting knowledge, good knowledge for this second online African School on Migration Statistics since we started until now. And thank you always for bearing with us. We didn't stick strictly to our agenda in terms of timeline, and we appreciate your support and staying on board until we concluded our meetings. So now we are going to move to the closing session of this second online school on migration statistics. And as we are going to close, first, I just want to reiterate and appreciate our presenters and our participants, and also to our technical support team, the interpreters, for their esteemed effort that they have done to make this online school a success. So for the closing session, I'd like to hand it over to Madam Leila to close the session for the online school on migration statistics. Madam Leila? Yeah.
Thank you, Brian, to give me the floor. But before delivering my closing remarks, I will call Mr. Jean-Pierre from Statistics Sweden to deliver his remarks.
Thank you, Madam Leila. On behalf of Statistics Sweden, let me start by thanking the organizers and all the attendees to this online school on migration statistics. This online school on migration statistics has been a good example of our ambition to facilitate capacity and increase the knowledge of better practices in production of migration statistics in Africa. It's the second time we are organizing an advanced school on migration statistics in the continent. We are more than convinced that this good experience will continue. The program for the 3 days was centered around 5 core topics, which are the preferred choices of the countries, as mentioned by the predecessors. With the discussions we had during this school, it showed us that the interest on migration statistics is very high, and Africa is showing a good example. Further, we showed a great resilience by making the necessary adjustments in organizing this summer school online, despite the COVID-19 crisis. It's a great sign of adaptive methods to keep working with statistics. By these positive words, I would like to reiterate my thanks to all participants and the organizers of this exceptional initiative of online school. I wish you many good luck and wanted also to welcome you back again for the 3rd edition of the school, which together with the African Union and the IOM GIMDAC, we will organize in the coming month. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean-Pierre, for these kind words. Now we come to the end of this second session of online African School on Migration Statistics. Distinguished representative from EU member states, distinguished partners, IOM GIMDAC, Statistics Sweden, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. Our second online African School on Migration Statistics ends today with a note and hope that we achieved the objective of this course. Critical issues were raised and important recommendations were highlighted. I would like to thank you for taking part in this great initiative that is the second edition of the online African School on Migration Statistics. It is an honor to be at this online African School, a demonstration of the continued commitment shown towards building capacity and supporting EU member states in an effort to enhance the collection, analysis, and dissemination of quality and timely migration data and statistics. I would like to commend StatAfrique, IOM, Global Migration Data Analysis Center, GIMDAC, and Statistics Sweden for their continued efforts demonstrated in steps taken to support EU member states in addressing migration statistics as key tool in attaining development and migration initiative at the global and continental level. Ladies and gentlemen, migration data and statistics have proven to play a pivotal role in the field of migration. Indeed, the importance of quality, accessible, disaggregated, reliable, and timely data to inform policies, action, and public opinion is well recognized and highlighted in multiple international and regional frameworks. The 2030 agenda of SDG highlights the importance of quality and timely disaggregated data to guide decision-making and help measure progress. Furthermore, the need of such data is reflected in the Global Compact of Safe, Orderly, and regular migration, which call for collection and utilization of accurate and disaggregated data as a basis for evidence-based policy in its first objective. At the continental level, also the EU Agenda 2063, a blueprint of development at the continental level, recognize the positive contribution of free movement of individuals for inclusive and sustainable development. Its implementation and monitoring are directly linked to the ability to collect, analyze, and disseminate quality data in the timely manner. In addition, the revised EU migration policy framework for Africa and its action plan for the 2018-2030 emphasize the continuing need for systematic and comprehensive migration data gathering, analysis, and exchange on all aspects of migration, both within and between African states. Such priorities are also highlighted in other initiatives at the regional and national levels. It is thus without a doubt that migration data and statistics represent a driving force for the implementation and monitoring of migration initiative. However, current data collection and analysis by national and international actors is sometimes patchy and unreliable. Data are not disaggregated by basis characteristics such as sex and age, and data sharing within and between countries may be limited. Ladies and gentlemen, it is therefore crucial to address the need for capacity building initiatives. As a matter of fact, issues of capacity, terminology, resources, data sources, and limited systematic collection, management, analysis, and disaggregation continue to be a challenge faced in the field of migration data. For the past 3 days, we have attended the second edition of the Online African School on Migration Statistics, an event that had covered various key points on migration statistics, including population and household census, estimation methods, and data disaggregated by key variable. The nature of this event will lead to concrete efforts aimed and at enhancing the capacities of member states and partners within Africa. There is no better platform than this online school to bring all relevant stakeholders together to tackle important questions linked to migration data and statistics. In much the same way as we collaborated closely with our partners, the AU StatAfrique stands ready to continue the support its member states to provide any technical assistance and expertise required to ensure better migration statistics. A third edition of this online school is planned for the 4th quarter of this year. We will make sure to keep you informed about and involved in the continuation of these activities. Ladies and gentlemen, before concluding my remarks, I would like to reiterate my thanks to all AU member states and their representatives for the interest you have shown to this second session of the course. Your rich contribution and recommendation have been absolutely remarkable. Let me congratulate all the speakers for their high quality presentation and their shared knowledge. I also would like to express my gratitude to the moderators, the technical staff of StatAfrique, IOM GIMDAC, and Statistics Sweden for their effort to make it a success. And also to all staff who had supported this course, in particular the technician and the interpreters. I thank you once again for your participation in this virtual event. It is over, and let's meet again during the next session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. No? No, no.